That was me when I was working. Retired from the Met, blah blah blah.
Oh, that's why I know you.
Eh?
That's why I know you.
You're the one that you want that got you through in the cells like that.
Yeah.
Right. When I retired, I came back home, born and brought up on Langley, came back home to look after my Mac. That's another story. But I eventually got into volunteering with the War Graves Commission to initially help them out on a programme called the Eyes on Hands On programme, which I'll come to shortly, which is about the care and upkeep of all the war graves and commemorations in the UK. But also, I was then asked to take on a role as a volunteer speaker. And we cover the whole of the country, but my particular one is the whole of the North West, from Cumbria down as far as almost Sheffield and the Isle of Man. So when I say this is thankfully my closest one, yeah, it really is. Reason I joined up with the War Graves Commission is my granddad, God rest his soul, fought in the First World War, came over from Dublin, joined the South Lancs Regiment, straight out to France in 1914, then eventually was transferred to the Machine Gun Corps, carried on. Thankfully, thank God, otherwise I wouldn't be here, survived the war. And at the end of the war, he volunteered to stay on within the battlefields to assist with the location and burial of all the remains that they could find. So to be honest, if my granddad could do it, I can do this. So I took the role on, and this is what we do. We come out and try to give you at least an overview of the work and ethos of the War Graves Commission and how it goes about trying to commemorate everybody. Everybody remembered. Their names liveth forevermore is the famous Rudyard Kipling phrase that is used for the commission. So, as we go on, I do tend to gibber a bit. So, but if you've got any questions, just let me know, and we will crack on with the. Hopefully, you won't get the notes on it. There you go. We start off about who we are and what we're doing. There is a short little video that you'll see in a sec. Just give you a brief overview of the commission. Now, just to give you a little overview of everything that we're doing, in total there are over 1.7 million Commonwealth service personnel that are commemorated by the Commission. We cover 23,000 locations around the world, so as you can imagine that is a massive undertaking that we've got. I won't go through all of these, but there's the 850 gardeners. The Commission is one of the largest employees of horticultural staff in the world. Worldwide, there is only 1,300 full-time staff with the Commission. The rest is made up of volunteers. Most of those staff are the gardeners and the horticulturalists who work at the main sites throughout the battlefields or near the battlefields in Europe, and then the staff who work at the archives in Surrey. An absolutely incredible archive, which I shall see shortly, is UNESCO recognised as a work of international importance. But with regards to the commemorations, at the moment, and this is just about to be changed, the youngest commemoration from the World War I battlefields is 14, and the oldest is 68. Recent research is just about to be confirmed. Those ages are about to change. The youngest one is going to come down by quite a way. The oldest one is going to go up by a couple of years, we believe. But the youngest one truly is incredibly young. In Tyne-Cot alone, which is the largest Commonwealth cemetery, there are 12,000 commemorations, and as I'll mention later, the vast majority of those are unknown soldiers. There we go, that should just give you a little brief outline. 1.1 million headstones, as you can imagine, that is a massive undertaking to keep going. And these are the member governments. Now, the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, say shortly, was formed during the First World War, and it was these 6 governments who formed by the Parliamentary Act that brought into the Imperial War Graves Commission into thing. These are the 6. You've got, if you don't recognise them, it's Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, the Republic of South Africa, and Great Britain. They all contribute to the upkeep of the War Graves Commission. The vast majority of the money does come from the UK, because most of the soldiers were actually fighting under the nationality of Great Britain. The lowest amount is actually from India. The reason being, the money is to maintain the burial sites and the headstones. Most of the Indian soldiers, thanks to their faith, when they were identified, were cremated. So there aren't any headstones. They're commemorated on other things, screen walls, tablets, but actual headstones to maintain, there are very, very few from the Indian subcontinent. So that's why the breakdown of the contributions of the various people and who we commemorate from those nations, they're all treated equally.
Is it just one pot for every? It's just one pot it all goes into. It's just
yeah. It's everyone pays in to the coffers of the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. They employ all the staff and volunteers worldwide, so they distribute the cash where it's needed. The vast majority, as I'm sure you can imagine, of the money goes over to Europe because they're maintaining the massive cemeteries and commissions, and the main stonemasons for the commission actually are based in France. There are a few based in the UK. In fact, there's a couple based down at Manchester Southern Cemetery who come out and do the northern part of England when they need maintaining. But as you can see, the vast array of people commemorated from every nation, creed and colour. I won't go through all of them, but the young man on the top left is a VC holder. Sorry, forgive me. He's a third one is the VC holder. Gentleman on the top left is a Maori pioneer, Battalion, New Zealand Expeditionary Force. We have from the Jamaica, and I'm sure you may or may not recognise the lady here. She is, I have to read her name every time because I can never get it right. She is Section Officer Noor Inyat Khan, a George Cross holder. She was initially in the Air Force, but she became attached to the Special Operations Executive and was murdered while on operations out in Europe. She was tortured, didn't give anything away, and she was murdered over there. The first woman to receive the George Cross, and a civilian lady at the end, good old Winifred Dalby. So they commemorate Victoria Cross holders, George Cross holders, Albert the merchant seaman, and Winifred the civilian. Everyone, all names remembered by the Commission. And the qualifying dates, start dates are easy. 1st of August 1914, the day that war was declared. 3rd of September 1939, day that war was declared. But the end dates obviously are a little bit unusual to some people. If you ask most people, they'll say 1918. As I'm sure you're aware, 1918 was actually the Treaty of Versailles. But the fighting went on in various theatres of war for quite some time afterwards. So in the end, the government passed an act, the Cessation of the War Act, I believe, and it declared that the war ended on the 31st of August 1921. But even though in the Ottoman Empire it continued till 1924, and in 1939 to 1945 again, war did continue with Japan and various other little territories, forgive me. So they decided again, 1947, and as they're the dates that the government over here decided were the end of the war, as far as the government was concerned, they are the dates that the Commission decided that anyone who died within those qualifying dates is allowed, for want of a better word, to have a Commonwealth War commemoration. Now, it doesn't matter to the Commission whether you were killed on the battlefield, whether you died of wounds back home, whether you died of an accident back home. You come home for your rest and recuperation and get run down by the number 163 bus, you would get a Commonwealth headstone. And there are several who came back suffering from what is popularly known as shell shock back then. Now, of course, it's PTSD, who quite sadly took their own lives. They are commemorated just the same by the Commission. And if people died as a result of wounds received in the war and their death can be attributed to their war service, again, they will receive a Commonwealth headstone. They might not necessarily fall within the dates, but if it was the wounds or the injuries or the gas that killed them outside of those days, you will still get a Commonwealth headstone if it can be proven that your death was directly attributable to your war service. Now, the origins of the thing. This is Sir Fabian Ware. Now, Sir Fabian Ware is the man to whom the whole existence of the War Graves Commission can be attributed. When the First World War broke out, Sir Fabian was 45 years old, and he was too old to take part in any armed services. Before the First World War, the common soldier or sailor who died in service could expect very little. There was no marked graves, they were very rare. The graves that were there were generally left untended, and little, if anything, was ever recorded about them. Now, when Sir Fabian Ware realised he couldn't join up to do his bit insofar as fighting was concerned, he became a commander of a mobile unit of the British Red Cross. And he was very concerned about this lack of information about the soldiers who were lying scattered across the battlefields. So what he and his unit did was to record as much as possible the resting places within the battlefields or at the medical aid stations of everybody and all their details, and ensured that these were all recorded. And the Red Cross, as it went out to all the various battlefields, was sent out with the mission, in addition to their Red Cross work, if someone dies, you tell us where they are, and as far as possible who they were, record it and keep those records. Now the War Office, by 1915, realised, actually, he's doing the right thing here, we need to give it formal recognition. So they did, and he became head and was formed the Directorate of Graves Registration and Inquiries. So at last, finally, soldiers, sailors, airmen towards the end of the First World War, had some people interested and the government interested in finding out who they were and where they lay as far as possible, which was an immense work. From the outset, were emphasised the importance of the imperial contribution to the war effort, and by that he meant everybody, not just the British sailors and soldiers who were going over there, but everybody who came over. Like you saw before, we had the Maoris, Indians, every nation under the sun who contributed ought to be remembered. So the Prince of Wales then got interested, and he submitted a memorandum to the Imperial War Office, War Conference, and in May 1917, officially the Imperial War Graves Commission was formed, and by royal charter. So it really was the work of Sir Fabian Ware has cemented the fact that every life mattered. And the Prince was the president and Sir Fabian Ware was the vice chairman. And the work of the War Graves Commission really only began in earnest, and could only begin in earnest, after the armistice. So land for the cemeteries was obtained from all the member, sort of France, from Belgium, from everywhere in Europe. The governments were approached and asked to set aside land where cemeteries could be established. And what generally happened was the cemeteries were established closest to aid stations and military hospitals, because that's where the vast majority initially of the known graves were. So they were all there. And as people were being found and brought in, they were going into these cemeteries in an action called concentration. So bodies were being lifted from trench burials, from wherever they were found, and brought as far as possible to the larger cemeteries. However, because this was quite a long time after the fighting, I'm sure most of you, if you've been anywhere near, will know that bodies do not do well exposed to the elements or just in soil. So identification was an absolute nightmare, because quite a lot of times they may have recorded who was there, put up a wooden cross, shell comes over, boom, and the bodies don't do well with that. So identification became a great issue. Dog tags were not common. They were issued, but they weren't commonly worn. Whatever reason, a lot of soldiers sent them home to their sweethearts so they'd have something to remember. And then when they were found, nothing to identify them. So of the bodies that were found, by 1918, 587,000 graves had been identified, but 559,000 dead were registered as having no known grave. So they were unknown soldiers, or they knew that the bodies were gone. The action of a shell on a person, there'll be nothing left but mist. You know, you've got no hope of finding the body. So, oops, sorry. So So this is the work went on to try to recover remains and bury them within a known site. And Rudyard Kipling, again a massive supporter of the work of the Commission, thanks to losing family members himself, he said that this work was the biggest piece of work since the Pharaohs. They only worked in one country. This was across Europe. Absolutely. I often wonder if, this picture may be something that it was something my granddad was doing. So when they were first put into these newly established cemeteries, initially they were put wooden crosses, and then over time the traditional Portland headstone was made and it replaced the wooden crosses. Now those wooden crosses were offered, if they had a known soldier, the families were offered those wooden crosses because there was no repatriation. The soldiers stayed overseas because of basically the logistics of getting that number of dead over to the UK and buried in the UK. It just wasn't going to happen. Not with the transport and whatever that was available back then. It would have been horrific and not possible. So the decision was taken that they would be buried where they lay, where they died, with their comrades where possible. That's why we've got the mass graves there. And once they're there, they will now have a, where possible, Portland headstone, but there are variations in that. So you'll find the traditional headstones all across the world. Wherever a burial or a soldier is found to be buried, they will offer the family, if the family is known, a Commonwealth headstone. But a lot of them turn down the Commonwealth headstone. That's why in the UK you will get a lot of commemorations on private memorials, not on the traditional white headstone. So you might walk into a graveyard and think, oh, we've got 3 or 4 war graves, but if you look it up on the Commonwealth War Graves app or on the website, they've got 15, not 4. That's because the families wanted them in the family plot with a family headstone and put on Granny's headstone or something like that. And that's why they've not got Portland headstone. Should the family memorial become unreadable, the Commission will replace it with a Portland headstone or whatever stone is available, but the Commission will put a headstone on if the family one is no longer commemorating the casualty.
I assume they just put the name of the person.
Yeah, where it's a family headstone, the only people who can go on, apart from 1 or 2 very rare exceptions, the only people who go on a Commonwealth headstone are the casualty who is entitled to that Commonwealth headstone. The family, the wife, the husband, or whoever, is just on the original family headstone. Now the reason that the Commission tries to keep the original headstone is that is the headstone that the family wanted, and that is the headstone that the family visited. That may be First World War, somebody's, as you saw, 18-year-old son is buried there. And that's the one his mum and his granny and his granddad and his siblings came and touched. And so where possible, that one will stay. But if necessary, they'll put a Commission headstone on. If there are other family members identified still living, they will be consulted first. But every single one has said yes to a Commonwealth headstone once that's happened. And they're quite happy for the great-great-grandma they never met to just fade into the distance, but the soldier will be commemorated. So this is the principles that Sir Fabian Ware and the Prince of Wales really made sure were taken on board by the government and put into the charter for the Commonwealth War Grave or Imperial War Graves Commission. Each of the Commonwealth dead should be commemorated by name on a headstone or on a memorial, which generally is to the missing. Headstones and memorials are permanent. They will always have one. And they are uniform with absolutely no distinction made for rank or civil status. The Queen Mother's brothers who died, they have got Commonwealth headstones. The fact that they are, you know, Lord whatever or Prince whatever, matters not. You will have the same headstone as everybody else. You lived and died as one. And that's just a picture of the original charter. Now, this, as I'm sure you recognise, is a traditional Commonwealth War Graves headstone. And the general set out is it will have the regimental unit or service badge at the top, unless it is South Africa or New Zealand. South Africa and New Zealand have those two on. Everyone, didn't matter what regiment you're in, you will end up with one of those two. Don't ask me why. Then, where possible, they will have the regimental number, rank, name, and regiment or service that they're in. Now, in a lot of them, you don't get their full name, you just get an initial and their surname. And that's because stuff was sent out to the family to please fill in all the details. The families were all over the place, as I'm sure you can imagine. Their heads are mashed. So they just put in an initial. And often what they also missed out was the age. The age on a lot of the Commonwealth headstones is not exactly the age that the person was. Especially in the First World War, people were lying about their age. They were saying they were 20 and they were 15. You know, there was an awful lot of that, which is why, remember I said at the beginning, the age of the youngest known casualty is coming down. They are just getting the final thing. It's going to come down, I believe it's 12 is the age. And there was a cabin boy who was 13, so yes, there were still cabin boys. And then, now the religious emblem, in 99% of the time, even on the unknown soldiers, is a cross, because that was the known faith of the vast majority of service personnel who signed up in the Commonwealth, apart from obviously India and China. So the cross, they decided we will have that. Now some you see that don't have a cross on, because the family asked for nothing. And there's also the Star of David, there's the Jane symbolism, there's some of the, is it bar, something, but where the family have asked for a different one, of course that was put on. But the vast majority you'll see, even of unknown soldiers, is a cross. And then at the bottom is a personal inscription. Again, the families were offered, if they wanted a personal inscription at the bottom of the headstone, please have it. Not all families did it, because unfortunately, for a while the government put out there that they were going to charge a couple of pennies per letter for each. Not a single family was ever charged. The Commission jumped up and down on people's heads in the government and said, we're not asking for money, so stop telling people that you're going to have to pay. But a lot of families did ask, even with the threat, as it were, of getting charged. They did ask for personal inscriptions. And we got some personal inscriptions came on with, there was a Private Gordon Smart who his family got, "We lie dead in many lands so that you may lie here in peace, live here in peace." Private Albert Bates, his family said, "A brave man and a good soldier." Lance Bombardier Albert William Bates, one of England's unknown heroes. And there's Private Downs, Private Herbert Downs. "Oh, to have clasped your hand, dear Herbert, to have brought you home." So that's every time. Right, other key features you might see in the War Graves Commission. Where there are more than 40 Commonwealth burials, the church, the cemetery, the burial ground would have been offered a cross of sacrifice. So that denotes that you have generally 40 or more people commemorated in that graveyard. The cross of sacrifice is not a war memorial. That is often a misunderstood thing. You see this with it's a downward sword. It's not a crusader sword, to make that clear. It's just a sword. And it's in a cross because, again, most people. But not all cemeteries and not all churches took up the offer of cross of sacrifice. There's a couple in, Denton Way, that have got more than 40, and the church authorities declined the cross of sacrifice. But there you go. But this is a stone of remembrance. Now that is generally made of Portland stone, the same stone that the headstones are made of, and a single block of Portland stone. That goes into cemeteries or burial grounds where there are over 1,000 burials, and it represents those of all faiths and those of none. There is no particular faith attached to the stone of remembrance. It's not an altar, it's not a prayer block, it's a stone of remembrance to denote that where you are has at least 1,000 burials. So if you see that, you know you've got a lot of people there. Right, and this is, after having said about all the headstones that we are taking care of, we've also got the problem, as it were, as it was called, of people who we don't know where they are. They're missing. What was going to happen to the missing? And the ethos of every name remembered, well, it was decided that they would build memorials to the missing. And on those memorials at Ypres and at Thiepval and several other places, all the missing are recorded on these things. And at the opening of the Menin Gate, Field Marshal Plumer said, "He's not missing, he's here." And that's the whole purpose of this, so that if families could get over to France and Belgium, they would be able to go and look and visit their loved one. Something was there that they acknowledged that they were over there. Now, the Menin Gate is just in the process of being renovated. And at Thiepval, they've just finished renovating Thiepval. It is absolutely magnificent. And the reason they had to renovate Thiepval, the architect, who you may recognise the name, Sir Edward Lutyens, he designed the cenotaph not only in London but Rochdale as well. And he also designed several buildings on King Street in Manchester, but there you go. But he did love his flat roof thing, everything flat. Problem with flat roofs, as I'm sure you're aware, water, everything gets destroyed. So they've had to do a massive renovation of that one. And now they're just undergoing a lot of renovation on here. And during that renovation, several names are added to the panels, but several names are taken off the panels, because as we'll go over shortly, people get identified through various means, so they're no longer missing, they have a known headstone. So once they're no longer missing, they do eventually get removed from the memorials to the missing, which is an absolutely incredible thing. Now, on this Menin Gate Memorial, there are in the region of 54,000 names of British, Australian, Canadian, South African and Indian forces. New Zealanders have smaller memorials closer to the battles where the New Zealanders fought. That was the decision of the New Zealand government. So it's within the principles of the War Graves Commission who they contribute to, but they preferred their soldiers, sailors, whoever, to be commemorated close to where the battles were. So that's why you get a lot of that. And I'm sure you're aware, the last post ceremony takes place at the Menin Gate at 8 o'clock every night. That is still going on despite all the renovation work and the scaffolding and everything else. It's still ongoing. And Here we go, right, global commitment, as I tried to mention earlier, virtually everywhere. You name the continent and it's there. But there you go. These are all the memorials within Europe, clearly. Not forgetting its First and Second World War, that's why it became more global. Asia, China, Africa, Australia, New Zealand, a remarkable number in North America, when you think about it. And the smallest cemetery that the Commonwealth War Graves Commission has as a war cemetery is in North America. There are 4 headstones there. It is a plot of land specifically for the Commonwealth. Well, it's the only people buried in that cemetery, and it's a war cemetery. That's the smallest one in North America. South America, quite a lot of that is sailors who have been washed up. Some are known, some are unknown. So you get that. Oh, speaking of weird little cemeteries, just going off plot. When I said that everyone's got either the family headstone or the Commonwealth War Graves headstone, Jersey, Channel Islands, only place invaded during the Second World War, occupied. They have got a war cemetery in St Helier at Howard Davis Park. The Commonwealth headstones there are oak crosses, because during the occupation there was no way that Nazi Germany was going to allow people to come over with the Portland stone and happily erect headstones for the sailors who washed up and were buried there. So a local lady, in defiance of the Nazis, donated several oak trees. Off you go. The local craftsmen made these absolutely beautiful oak crosses and created their own war grave plot in Howard Davis Park. Howard Davis, another multimillionaire on Jersey, gave them the land. And after the war, the commission came over, said, right, we'll replace all these with our standard headstones. Oh, no, said Jersey. We fought under Nazi occupation to get these headstones up. We went through hell to get these headstones up. We want to retain these headstones. And the commission said yes. So that's why if you're on Jersey, go to Howard Davis Park, just on the outskirts of St Helier, and you will see these magnificent little war cemetery. And a lot of the people there have now been identified as American sailors from HMS Charybdis, I do believe. But there you go. And for once, the Americans haven't repatriated them back to America. It's the only ones we know of where they are happy to leave them there. Because the Americans are nightmares for that. Right.
You didn't repatriate through Slaps and Sands either.
The Americans, if you ever go down to Manchester Southern Cemetery, where there are over 1,300 war graves commemorations in Southern Cemetery, you'll see there's several plots where there's line after line of Commonwealth headstones with gaps. And the gaps tend to be where American service personnel were buried, and the Americans have asked for repatriation. So they've had to be uplifted and go back. And you know what? It's their country, their rules, their decision. But yeah, they've got a policy back there of bring them all home, haven't they? Largest site, Tyne Cop. Now, Tyne Cop was designed by Sir Herbert Baker, and the platform on which the Cross of Sacrifice was designed by a veteran of that war, a chap by the name of J.R. Truelove. And on the memorial, on this one, there are about 35,000 British and New Zealand forces killed in action around that area. And in the cemetery, there's about 12,000 graves. Of those 12,000 graves, 70% are unknown. So, all across the Ypres salient, so 70% of those graves you see there are a soldier known unto God. Don't know who they are. And that there, remember I said about Sir Edwin and his flat things? That's Deep Fell. And on Deep Fell, there are 72,000 names of the missing from the British and South African forces who died during the Battle of the Somme. And there's about 300 British Empire forces and 300 French forces buried in the cemetery. So in comparison to the amount of missing on the memorial, to the amount buried in the cemetery, it's just beggars belief, really. So, now this is basically where the actual cemeteries that we've got are across the globe, literally across the globe. I think Antarctica and the Arctic are the only two places where there aren't any Commonwealth War commemorations. So I can see here, Gallipoli. Gallipoli, I'm sure, I don't know if you're aware, have not got the headstones, they've got what are called Gallipoli markers. Because of the nature of the ground, you couldn't put a headstone up, so they got plaques on stones there. El Alamein in Egypt, the lack of the green loveliness is because obviously it's a desert. To try to take millions of gallons of water every year to try to maintain greenery when the people are fighting for water themselves seems a little naughty. Kenya. Now Hong Kong, the Chinese government have agreed that they will not encroach on the war cemetery at Hong Kong, which was actually, it's going to say, but it's quite gracious of them. You know, it's their land, they made no agreement about the war graves. But Hong Kong itself is ever encroaching. That used to be, when this cemetery was laid out, that was a view straight down to the sea and the open waters, a view back home was the thinking of that. Can't do it. El Alamein in Egypt is not so but Iraq. Singapore, again, very well looked after and maintained. Sorry about this. I have to apologise for this. They changed the presentation on us a couple of days ago. So now, stats for the amount of people killed and who are commemorated vary very much. The Second World War, they believe at least 15 million military deaths worldwide, and probably double that number of civilian casualties. And in the First World War, about half of that. So they will commemorate millions of people across the world, because it's a mere, 22 years after the end of the First World War that we were at it again with the Second World War. The war to end all wars, unfortunately, wasn't, so the Commission's work continued. Now, in the United Kingdom, strangely, there are 306,000 service personnel commemorated in the United Kingdom across 13,000 locations, and of the 306,000 commemorations in the UK, there are 170,000 with the traditional headstones. So you can see what I was saying earlier about lots of them are on private memorials. The vast majority are on private memorials, and they are taken care of and looked after by 1,250 volunteers with the Eyes On, Hands On programme, which is you get given a list of cemeteries that are mainly nearby to where you live, with a list of every commemoration, and you go out. Your first job is, number one, find them, because cemeteries, especially, you look at somewhere like St Michael's at Tong, that cemetery you have to get your in a mountain goat to get around most of it. And grave locations, you're given row A, grave 15. Speak to anyone at these churches and cemeteries, right? Where's plot A, row 15, grave 6? Well, no. They'll show you a plot map, and it bears absolutely no relation to the way the cemetery is set out. It's great. So when you've got the information from the initial War Graves Commission information, what it is nearly 100 years later is an amazing thing. So you go out and your first job, find the plots, find the graves, then you take a picture of it, because eventually on the Commonwealth War Graves website, every grave will have a picture of that grave and headstone attached to the service personnel name. So if you're a relative in New Zealand, you can go on the War Graves website and find a picture of your relative's grave or memorial wherever they may be across the world. So that's coming on board. And then the other job that the volunteers do is to try to make sure you've got a clear path to see the grave and to clean it off as much as possible to read it. And as long as it's legible, that's fine. It's not like the Arlington, where you go and every grave you look at is this bright white beaming at you thing. In the Commission takes a much more eco-friendly approach to the maintenance of the graves. The graves are over 100 years old, some of them, and sometimes the state you see reflects their age. And as long as they're legible, then the Commission is generally happy with that, because we don't want to kill half the cemetery grass just so that you can read the war grave, but they should all be clear and legible. That's the criteria, with no massive bird fouling or soil staining. There's one cemetery nearby, at the bottom of Langley Lane, the tiny little church on the right. Yeah, they've got 3 war graves in Birch, 2 of which, for all intents and purposes, you have to trek through a bog to get to them. The ground is so waterlogged there, and they suffer massively with soil splash. Every time it rains, they get covered in mud. So go down, you clean it, within a few weeks, you can't read it because it's covered in mud. The Commission are looking at doing something with the ground immediately around there to try to reduce the soil splash. But that, and St Michael's at Tongue, there was one there that was just completely overgrown with brambles. You couldn't see this particular war grave with brambles. What had happened there was they had volunteers in from the payback teams, community payback teams, to clear the graveyard. Along they come, oh, that bit of the graveyard's ancient, no one's obviously visiting there. Padoing through the bramble clippings, and what do bramble clippings do? They root and they grow. And they hadn't realised that top left-hand corner, not looking like a traditional war grave, it was a war grave. And it was just completely overgrown with brambles, as was its 2 neighbours. That took a lot of jumping around and clippers and gosh, don't watch me, I'm spraying weed killer. Yeah, but it did it. Now, we also look after other nations, because prisoners of war, service personnel from other nations did die in the UK. So in the UK, you will find, now of course one of the main ones, Polish, especially in West London. Polish graves are very common, Polish Air Force, lots of Polish war graves over here. We've also got Czech ones, which are a lot fewer. German, we have got several German soldiers buried in the UK. And in fact, there is at least 2 at Manchester Southern Cemetery. The very end one is Dutch. Now, the War Graves Commission maintains these nations' graves as a reciprocal arrangement with those nations. So any British or Commonwealth who are in a German cemetery, they will be looked after to the standards of the War Graves Commission within that graveyard in Germany or Poland or wherever. So they're the different ones. And we also, before I go on to we also, in the M24 area, there are 88 war graves, commemorations in the area Borshaw has got 27 war graves with 3 MOD graves. Now I'm sure you know the Lee Rigby is the most well known
Rigby's
one.
got Edmonton.
Yeah,
Lee
yeah.
Rigby's got Edmonton.
And the third one?
Is Joel Halliwell.
No,
He's not
he,
got
he is not a war graves commemoration because he
Oh,
died
okay.
well afterwards. The third one is a young man from Langley, also from only round the corner from Lee Rigby. He's called Stephen Wally.
M62 one.
Oh,
Yeah, he was killed on the M62.
M62,
Yeah, now, see what I mean? Lots of people forget poor old Stephen. And Stephen was only 19.
19,
Yeah.
when the bomb went.
And they all forget that he's up there. Now, he has got an MOD grave, which look for all the world like Commonwealth war graves, but they've got 2 little notches on, so the top of it isn't smooth like that. It comes down and it's got a little notch. So it looks like bunny ears is what they call it in the stonemasons. But they come down and there's like a little notch there, and they're the 3 in Borshaw that belong to the MOD, but they again are looked after by the EOHO programme. Their graves will always be trimmed so that there's no random things. Now we're very lucky with Scott Hetherington and Lee Rigby in that you never really have to do anything with them. Stephen Wally quite often have to do a little bit of a spruce up of Stephen. Now somebody did go at it on Stephen's headstone years ago with bleach, and it delaminated the MOD headstone. However, the family in the interim have put up their own headstone for Stephen on the other end of the grave, where it's all perfectly legible. So the MOD have decided that for now, Stephen's headstone, if you see it and you think, why is that looking like that? You can barely read it. It's because he's commemorated at the other end of his grave. He's perfectly legible. The MOD have yet to reinstitute his grave, but Scott Hetherington's and Lee Rigby's, they are looked after just the same, as is Scott's to be fair, by the War Graves Commission. So they'll get the same photographs done, they'll get the same cleaning cycle, and the same trimming cycle. So, in Borshaw, the youngest recorded war grave casualty is 18, and the eldest is 60. Now the eldest one, he was a officer in the drafting board, and he died of natural causes during the course of the war, so he was entitled to a Commonwealth headstone, but the family have put up this mahoosive thing and he's on there. So, but again, we will go there and make sure that he is legible, he's cleaned, he's looked after. There is one at Borshaw that it's like a marble curbed gravestone. It's smashed to bits, but the sailor actually who's commemorated on it, the section of marble where he is commemorated is perfectly clean and legible. So until that changes, that is his commemoration. And there is one poor unfortunate, his family grave, I'm sure those of you who know Borshaw Cemetery, it can get a bit damp. His grave headstone has sunk over the years, and he is now just about visible at the line of the grass, and it's really sinking. So the commission are in touch, trying to get in touch with the family, because they want to come along with their equipment and raise the original one again. And if that's not possible, they'll pop a Commonwealth headstone on there. But that's what's happening at Borshaw. You've also got close by St Joseph's at Moston. Big old there's over 350 commemorations in St Joseph's at Moston. And I've mentioned before Manchester Southern Cemetery, 1300 at Manchester Southern. Mainly because Manchester Southern got all the burials from the various airfields that were around Bowley, Eaton Park, everywhere like that. But there are also the military hospitals, and everyone who died at the military hospitals tended to get buried at Manchester Southern Cemetery, which included several nurses who
Can I
died
just
at
ask about some Commonwealth war graves at All Saints?
All Saints and Road, yes, there are. There's, don't have the exact figures for All Saints because I just looked up the closest thing, which was Warsha. Yeah, there's only a few in there. I think it's three or four if memory serves. But if you go onto the War Graves website, CWGC.org, you can search for the cemetery, and it will tell you exactly who they are and where they are within that cemetery. I don't know if they're on Commonwealth headstones or if they're on private memorials. They're the challenging ones to find, the private memorials. So, the continuation of the work. Oh, talking private memorials and Commonwealth headstones, one thing I didn't mention. They always said the Portland stone, that's the traditional stone, whitish stone that we all know. During several periods, Portland stone wasn't available, and that which was available was of quite poor quality. Not too many inclusions, too many fossils, everything in it. So other sources of stone were sourced, and particularly for far-flung areas. Around here, one of the most common alternate stones is a thing called Stancliffe stone, which has the unfortunate habit now of looking like, for all the world, a paving slab. It's that colour and texture. It didn't quite work out, didn't Stancliffe, but that's what you got, and that's why that one at All St Michael's in Tongue, they chuck stuff on, because although it's a Commonwealth headstone, Stancliffe stone, and it did not look like a Commonwealth headstone. They got this thing from Italy called Botticino marble. Looks lovely, but it's got veining in it that looks like the stone is mucky and horrible. And no matter how much you clean it, it will always look like that. Then they've got other ones in granite, is another popular one. So they're the three main ones in the UK. And up north, even further up north than we are, slate is quite common as well. So it may not look like a Commonwealth headstone until you look at the front. It might well be a Commonwealth headstone. And there are also some fake Commonwealth headstones where families would like their old soldier dad remembered in that way, but obviously not entitled to a headstone, so they just get one manufactured. So we've got to be. There we go. Gardening, I remember I said about biggest employer of gardeners. Now the initial plan was that every plot where there's a lot of Commonwealth headstones would be made to look like a corner of England. So the flowers were generally tried to be like an English country garden. So you'd get roses and pansies and, I don't know, horticulturist petunias. Tried to maintain that. However, in various parts of the world, that's just not possible. It's really not possible. It takes up too much water, is the main thing. So what they're now trying to do is move over onto a more ecological approach and a more environment-friendly approach. So they'll use local flowers and local planting. And if it's a more desert area, I don't know, some sort of cactus or something, that they maintain it as best they can without destroying everybody else's environment around it. In total, more than half of the 1,750 acres of ground under the Commission's control is given over to fine horticulture, making maintenance a year-round task for the 900 gardeners. And most of the gardeners in some of the more far-flung areas, it's a family affair. Dad or granddad was a gardener for the War Graves Commission. Their children, grandchildren, and in several cases great-grandchildren are now employed by the War Graves Commission as gardeners. And there is massive pride taken in a lot of these nations and territories about the maintenance of the war graves. Now, they employed some of the greatest architects across the globe to do this. Now, the Menin Gate Memorial, there's some of the intricate details on the Menin Gate. Unless you go there, it's absolutely impossible to appreciate. just how intricate the carving and the details are. Another place that's amazing is, have you ever been down to Runnymede? The RAF Memorial in Runnymede in Surrey, I believe it is. If you go in there and look up, the architecture that they've done there is just astonishing. Absolutely amazing. Again, they employ more stonemasons, architects, and as you can see, ongoing into. So that there at the top right is actually Gallipoli, and this one, which I believe is Eritrea. So local people getting on board with discovering what we're doing. And this is the work being done on the Menin Gate. As you can see, it's really undergoing a massive, massive, massive programme of regeneration. But although this end, one end is blocked off at a time, the last post will always be sounded within the Menin Gate. This is one of the new slides. This is what I was talking about, the environmental sustainability. The Commission recognises that the operations have an adverse impact on the environment, and they're committed to boosting efforts to transition to more sustainable ways of working, continually improving and monitoring the environmental performance, and complying with relevant environmental legislation. What it boils down to is whatever you do to clean and maintain the headstones must not negatively impact on the surrounding area. So you can't have at it with substances to get rid of the algae and moss and everything else that if it drains into the soil would kill off parts of the soil. So they've got to use eco-friendly methods of cleaning. And every year there is a treatment cycle for all the headstones in the UK, whereby the Commission comes out and treats all the headstones, and over the next few months that will bring down most of the algae and the moss and everything else. But while that's happening, the volunteers are not allowed to go up there with their brushes and everything else and clean it off. So for now in this area, the northwest, it's January, February, March are the 3 months when they're out with their treatment cycle. So it may well be in those months, if you see a headstone that you think, that's looking a bit green, it could well be the cleaning cycle itself that it looks worse than it is while it's dying off, and then it goes back down. So it's a bit of a mare to do it sustainably. Now, the reconstruction. Unfortunately, conflict continues around the globe, and during those conflicts, war graves and cemeteries have been absolutely devastated. Now we've got on the left, it's Habanya, the former RAF base that was completely obliterated by the Iraqi army. However, there are nearly 300 now brand new headstones being erected with the help and the assistance of local contractors and local people. And on the right, you've got Mosul War Cemetery. So it's ongoing. They get help as well from the mine clearing charity. They've come along and gone through the war cemeteries because they were a prime site to site landmines, and that's Habanya now. That was it, and now they've got 300 new. So you can see it's ongoing. The commitment by the Commission to make sure that everything maintains names will go on. Now occasionally that just can't happen. Cemeteries become dangerous, they become cemeteries get sold to contractors, don't they? Broken down old churches, they'll sell the land. And despite there being agreements with parish councils and churches to have this particular plot of land maintained for the war graves, unfortunately, over time, these agreements fall into the background. So you end up with war graves being taken away. And what happens then, if the Commission finds out about it in advance, they can uplift the casualties and rebury them somewhere suitable. In fact, there's a cemetery from Harper Hay, not the big one, there was a little one. They've been uplifted and reburied at Southern Cemetery, and a few others like that. But in some of them, it's happened after the event. So all that happens is they just get reburied in a mass grave, and you don't know who's who. So what they do there, they put a screen wall up, and it will say, buried in this churchyard are, or buried in this area are, and they'll list everyone on the screen wall. And there's a few of them actually up at Manchester Southern and at Moston. So you get screen walls where the graves have been lost. There's, you know, what's the name of it? Is it St Gabriel's up in Castleton Moor? So Saint something in Castleton Moor. It's the one on top of the hill going in towards Rochdale. Big one on the hill. They know where all of their graves are, bar two, who are on, there's a little two headstones by the church wall itself that just says buried in this cemetery are, and it names the two casualties. And what happened there was they were originally buried by the old rectory. And then along comes whoever makes a decision, we're going to knock this rectory down, build a new one, absolutely fine, no problem, and we'll build a new road to get up to the rectory. Unfortunately, under that driveway to the new rectory are the two graves of the Commonwealth war dead victims. So that's why the Commission came along and put the special memorial there to say, we know they're in the churchyard, but we can't identify exactly where, so we'll put that here. And that's happened more than once at many churchyards, but that's just your local one. So, now, reburials and rededications. There are between 36 and 50 sets of remains found every year, rediscovered, especially with the encroaching urbanisation of a lot of these sites. They're finding people all the time. Now, where possible, they do everything to try to identify these casualties. Every scrap of anything that's found with them, they will narrow it down, and if they can, they will identify a likely candidate or a definite candidate. Now, if it's a likely candidate, what they will do, as the bodies haven't been exhumed to do this, they are there. They will DNA test where possible the remains, and then they'll go to the families, if they can track them down, of the likely soldiers and try to get a DNA match like that. Unfortunately, sometimes, no matter what they do, they cannot identify the casualty. As happened here, all they could get was 2 Australian soldiers, and one soldier, they got as far as identifying he was from the Lancashire regiment, but that was it, no further. Have you heard of the war detectives? I'm sure you have. The MOD, Joint Casualty Centre. They work with the Commonwealth War Grave Commission, with all the archives that the War Grave Commission has, and they make absolutely Herculean efforts to identify the remains. But no matter whether they're identified or not identified, they will be buried with full honours at a grave site near to where they were found, so that they can, where possible, remain with their comrades that they died with. And this is what happened here. The 2 Australians and Lancashire. But yeah, and that's why, Do any of you belong to any of these World War One interest groups on Facebook?
Yeah.
Right. I've seen quite a few times where people have been over to the battlefields and they found something. Now, more often than not, it's a shell casing, not a problem. But occasionally they will find a tunic button, or they'll find a fragment of uniform, and they bring it home. And you say, well, did you identify precisely where you found this? Down to, you know, that What 3 Words app? What 3 Words is an app on your phone. It will tell you exactly where you are to within a foot. Also, latitude, longitude on your phone. Did you identify where you were when you found this, and have you told the MOD or the CWGC where you were and where you found it? Finding it, not a problem. Taking it home, not really a problem. But record where it was found, record where it is, and tell people where it was. To them it's just a souvenir, but that one tunic button or shoulder flash might be the final thing that identifies that soldier for their family. That might be the final little piece of the puzzle that gives their name. And there was one not that long ago where a flash was found of a soldier, and they found the remains with the flash, and this regiment had been nowhere near where this regiment should have been. And eventually they tracked down, it was one soldier who had been at a military hospital. He'd left, but on his way back, the fighting had recommenced, and he'd joined in with the unit who happened to be there. So they knew that, so that by finding that one little bit of his uniform, they could identify exactly who that remains belonged to. He was identified and given a known grave in the cemetery. Tiny little fragment of uniform did that. That's why if you're ever doing any of the trips, please just be careful what you find. The archives of the War Graves Commission are still being updated, and we're still getting more and more things in. But internationally, it has been recognised by UNESCO as being world importance. If you ever get a chance to go down there to visit them, they are astonishing. But they have every record of every soldier that they can find. Now, there is a little bit of a problem with some of the soldiers from overseas and the Commonwealth, because they can only record what they were told. And if the information didn't come from the various other countries, they haven't got it. But it's ongoing work, and will remain ongoing work to identify everybody and recording every name. Now, several years ago, do you remember there was a documentary by David Lammy, I think the MP, and he jumped on and started making it known about the non-commemoration of soldiers from Africa, China. It was a different world back then. A lot of times the volunteers or the soldiers were only known by number. Their regiments just called them, they gave them all the same name. I think a name of Joe was given to a lot of the Chinese soldiers from the Chinese labour force. So there were thousands and thousands of people not commemorated, which is wrong. And the Commission has unreservedly apologised for the omissions in the past. And they are making great efforts now to identify all these people and to commemorate them the same as every other service personnel, by name and permanently. And in Sierra Leone, I think they've just managed to identify over 900 casualties from Sierra Leone, and they are being now commemorated rightfully in cemeteries at Sierra Leone. And really it's ongoing. They deserve as much commemoration as anybody else. And that work is ongoing, and was actually ongoing before David Lammy did his documentary. But he did his documentary, and as always happens, social media exploded. This work was ongoing before that. So, right now this is a new thing that the Commission are doing. As time goes on, people are dying off whose parents, grandparents, great-grandparents fought and died in the World Wars. And as people are dying off, the story behind the name is dying off as well. So what the Commission has now done, it's got a section of the website, Forevermore, the stories of the fallen. And what it's asking you, or anyone you know, or just make it known, you can go online at the War Graves Commission website and upload the story of your relative or friend's relative or whoever, with pictures, their history, you know, the fact that they were Joe the postman from down the road, and he joined up the rifles section, the postal rifles section, and he died, and he had 3 kids, and he loved football, and his greatest passion was Accrington Stanley, God love him. So, you know, make them live again by giving their stories. So if you know any stories, or you know elderly people, especially, who may have stories of their dads, their granddads, please try to get them online or go online for them and upload their stories. It's becoming very, very, very vital that this is done as soon as possible. So the Commission is very proud of the fact that this has been highlighted and is now being done. I think there was a lady at a talk who recently, local lady, who came along and she had a picture of her granddad. She was very elderly herself and her granddad, and she was telling us all the stories, and we managed to put her in touch with someone who could upload it all for her. So granddad's story is now being told, and that is what's vital. These aren't just names liveth forevermore, they're people. Every person has a tale. So please, if you can, go online and help us out with that one. I do believe. The website is an absolute vast array of knowledge for absolutely everything. And we've also got a thing called the War Graves Foundation, which the War Graves Commission is not allowed to raise money from anyone apart from the member governments. So they thought, how do we raise a bit more money here? So they created a charity arm called the War Graves Foundation. And you can make donations to there. You can join up to the foundation and receive newsletters and updates, and similar way to with the Legion, you can join up and do the Poppy Lottery and do all sorts of things and support them by direct debit and a constant ongoing. That's the members scheme. War Graves Week every year. We have events all over the Northwest which do include tours of the various cemeteries and memorials. Manchester Southern Cemetery is the main tour that is done around here. There's also the Naval Memorial in Liverpool, because obviously sailors generally, 90% unknown, they're buried at sea. So you've got Plymouth, Chatham and Liverpool are the 3 main naval memorials. They get a lot of people going there. Mailing lists, sharing the stories. Can't emphasise enough, if you know a story or your mate from wherever you served, his dad knows a story, please get them online, get it uploaded. And we are on social media, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, whatever that is.
YouTube.
No, that
LinkedIn.
is that LinkedIn?
LinkedIn.
Is it LinkedIn?
Yeah.
There you go, learn something new every day. Here we go. And this is the visitor centre. It's an amazing place. It involves a bit of a trip over the channel to go and see it. But you'll see the work of the stonemasons, the archivists, the researchers, and there are tours done at the visitor centre. Remember I said we weren't allowed to raise money, the commission. The Post Office Foundation, strangely, has made a massive donation because they had so many post office workers who have died in both world wars. So they have generously donated an awful lot of money to allow these talks and the work of the foundation to continue. 12,000 postal workers. So this is a young man from Birmingham, got the VC. Thankfully, in a way, he is a known casualty at a known location. So he's over there in France. And there's a chap who works for the post office who he has done an absolutely unbelievable amount of research into all the postal workers who died. It's been almost a lifelong thing for him, and he has been brought on board with the War Graves Commission to share the stories, to share the work. She said. There we go. And it just shows you the range of people. There we go. Looks about 18, doesn't it? Now, Arnold, bless him, from Huddersfield, he had two brothers and his mum and dad, and he was a postal worker, little postie, wandering the streets of Huddersfield, joined up, and really, that was the last of our. He's the closest one here that we know of. So we're like,
North Post Office,
so no worries. Right, and this is obviously the civilian war dead. There were lots and lots of them. Now these two ladies, Hilda and Winifred, they were working in a post office when it got hit by a V2. And that was the end of Hilda and Winifred. Now I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, Middleton did actually get bombed a couple of times, mainly because of Bowley and Heaton Park.
No,
No?
no,
I thought it did.
no.
Because
AV Road.
there's a chap.
There was Bowley, which was a maintenance, maintenance.
yeah.
Ellsworth was maintenance. There was no aircraft here. It was Bad Ice Balloon, and what they were after was AV Road.
Right.
The Lancaster
Yeah,
bomber and
that's
that
right.
thing.
Now, because I know that there is at least one person from Walsha who was killed by a bomb. He was a war air raid warden, and he was killed by a bomb.
There were a couple of bombs dropped in roads, jettisoned in roads, in the lodges.
that
One in the middle of the road,
Like I say,
and the other in the
whole,
lodges.
that's what I say, you know more than
You
me.
know that.
You will definitely know more than me. I just remember reading this one, and the reason I remembered about this one particular war casualty by a bomb was he was at the time a serving police officer, but he was he's remembered on the civilian roll of honour at Manchester Town Hall, because all the civilian dead from this area are remembered at
The
Manchester.
reason I know about the bombs in roads.
Yeah, no,
When I came out of
please.
the regiment out of the 40s,
Yeah,
I was actually fishing on waters in roads.
yeah.
And I'd seen these things sticking out, just ignored it. And my grandparents told me about the bombs in the Second World War, because they lived in the village when it was. And there was two young kids there, faffing about, and one of them went, look what I've done, oh, that everything down.
Yeah.
So I picked it up and I put it point down into the water, and I said, you go and get the police, go and the police over there. And the funny thing is, the lad that came out from bomb disposal was a lad I worked with in Northern Ireland.
There you go.
And he went, there, give me the sugar bang, you know what to do. I went, thanks, Norbert. Well, and the hole, and from the sandbag with the dirt, put him take out the hole to put over the top. And he just picked up the bomb and blew it.
I mean, used to get that when
Well,
it was,
there'll be a line of where that one was,
yeah,
because there's a water down in those that's not been fished, nobody been able to fish it for a long, long time.
right.
So I think there may be 2 or 3 more in that area.
Well, you
But I'm
know,
going to go magnet fishing next week and see if I can find it.
the Thames is full of unexploded ordnance. The Thames is absolutely full of this stuff. A lot of it's
It's not doing
mapped.
any damage.
But whenever they're dredging the Thames for it's still a working waterway, they have to close the Dartford tunnels and the tube lines that go up and down, and they've got doors at each end of the tunnels, watertight doors, because although they think they know where all the ordnance is and can avoid it, you never know, there might be one there, and if it blows, you don't want to take out London Transport,
Why not?
everything.
That's not
Sorry,
into
so-
town. She was all a favour.
Do everyone a favour. Why do you think I left London and came back on?
No.
There you go. Right, and these are the ways that you can help the foundation. You can join up on a monthly subscription, £3 a month, bless you. Just make a one-off donation. Volunteer, there's loads of roles available with the Eyes on, Hands on, the speakers programmes. You can also volunteer to be a researcher, and people like yourself are brilliant for that, because you know the stories of what actually happened. People like me who just vaguely remember seeing it in a book or a piece of paper somewhere can only gibber a little bit, but if you know the exact reason and exactly what happened, you can tell that tale and let the War Graves Commission know, and we can record what actually happened. Memories are everything. Or you can do fundraising challenges, but you do enough as the leader, you're more than doing your bit. Because despite the fact they're 2 separate organisations, I personally believe, and I'm sure a lot of you do, that the work of the Legion and the work of the Commission are actually like that.
Yeah.
You know, and it's very telling at the Festival of Remembrance, when the poppies are falling, on the screen is usually a picture of one of the large war cemeteries. So you've got all the Commonwealth headstones. We are symbiotic, I would say, organisations. So, yeah. So, there we go. That, as they say, is me gibbering on. Has anyone got any burning questions that I can gibber on there for you?
I've got one.
Yes.
About 4 years ago, I was down in Cambridge
Yes.
and driving on the road there, and I passed an American war cemetery. I don't really know it.
Yeah, I do, yeah.
Yeah, who is that maintained by? Is that
No.
That's what I think you'll find. Majority of people in there are what was killed and injured at slaps and stands when the Americans
right?
continued to fire onto the troops that were coming into land.
The maintenance of it, in the reduction of the number of air bases,
Yeah.
with the American presence in the UK, has reduced and reduced and reduced. There used to be places like Middleton Hall.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And what happens is, as they're withdrawing, they are contacting the War Graves Commission and asking, will you maintain the cemeteries on our behalf?
Right.
And the Commission, so there is this reciprocal arrangement with nations who are not part of the founding members of the Commission, like Poland, Czech, Germany. The Americans maintain those graves in America that are there.
Yeah.
The War Graves Commission will maintain for the Americans an American. Now, I can't say definitively that that one is under the auspices of the CWGC, but in absent any American involvement or nearby people who can look after it, because the vast old American air bases of old have greatly reduced.
Oh yeah.
They used to be like America Town, didn't they?
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and that, as that's going, the Commission will, if asked, take on that responsibility and will be glad to. Because you've got to then,
Yeah.
just because they're American, we'll still do it. Anything else?
I'll just say 2 things,
Yeah.
or possibly 3. In the summer we went to a dedication service at Crompton Cemetery, where 2 new war graves were actually, shall we say, inaugurated. They've been buried there since the First World War. One, they knew where the guy was buried, so that stone is there. The trouble was that the other one, is in, for all intents and purposes, the middle of grass, because he was buried in the pauper cemetery.
Yeah,
So it's the nearest bit to where they think he actually is.
yeah. And his headstone will have it's called a superscript on the top of it, that near here is buried, or buried in this churchyard, one of the two. Ongoing research, especially by family members, identified people with known graves, and we know they're in the cemetery, and they managed to confirm and prove that their death fell within the criteria operated by the Commission for them to be afforded a Commonwealth War Graves commemoration.
This was somebody from RBL Shaw.
Yeah, now what happens is, remember I said about the website, on the website you'll find a link to a non-commemoration report, and you can go on there and you input everything that you have, and it'll go off to the archivists. Now it may well be they're already working on it and you're just highlighting it to them again, but you may have extra information that will help them to prove definitively that that person should have been commemorated by the CWGC and will now be commemorated. And again, the family, if found, will be offered a Commonwealth headstone if they want, and they will be erected as everybody else and then maintained forever by the CWGC.
And the only other thing is, I've got a picture of some of the grave markers that she was talking about in a church opposite the Tower of London. So I'll put it on our Facebook page so you can have a look at it.
Yeah, that'd be grand. Yeah, but, I mean, a lot of those, when the, Granny would have this original marker in her bedroom because her beloved little boy, because a lot of them were teenagers, died over there, and that's all she's got. She couldn't get herself over to France or Belgium to commemorate him, so that's all she had. But over time, when the old days have passed away themselves, some of them, the council have to come in, or whoever, and clear their houses. All they do is they get everything, put it in a skip, and off it goes.
Yeah.
And a lot of those original crosses went. Now, a lot of local groups like the RBL, lots of First World War local historical societies, if they get hold of them, they preserve them. But if you've got one of those wooden crosses, that service person has a Commonwealth headstone somewhere else. And you quite often get that in cemeteries as well. You'll have at the bottom of a normal private memorial, or on a little, as I found one at Bury Cemetery, a little flower pot that had Lance Bombardier, somebody or other on it. Did a little bit of the old googly, and he was actually in a known grave in El Alamein. But the family wanted somewhere they could go to and commemorate him, and he had this little pot, stone pot, that had, over time it had fallen over, and it was partially buried, and it was in a right old state. Now, I don't actually look after Bury Cemetery for the War Graves Commission. I look after 4 graves up there that are a load of nuns from the Order of the Daughters of the Cross, and I look after their graves. For them, they run my school, so I look after them. And it was while I was digging around and looking after them that I found this little thing. So me and my friends who were looking after the nuns now look after this private little stone pot, because although it's not his grave, he's buried and looked after in Egypt. Goodness gracious, that's what the family wanted. You can't let him just fall over and be forgotten. So it's not a war graves thing, it's a 6 girls from Bury Convent thing, looking after this little pot. So you may well find those at cemeteries as you're wandering around yourself. Why aren't the Commission doing anything about it? Get the name, look him up on the database, and see whether it's just a local little commemoration for someone who's buried overseas. If not, and if that's the only commemoration for that service personnel, and you think it's looking horrible and it's looking neglected, and please email the commission and let them know. There might well be a volunteer assigned to that cemetery who just hasn't found it yet, or it might be one of the cemeteries where they haven't yet got a volunteer to look after it. There are only at the moment, as I said, about 1,240 volunteers on the Eyes On, Hands On programme for all those 300,000 commemorations in the UK. You can only do so many, and you might have missed one or two, or one or two cemeteries might have not been allocated yet. If in your travels, whether it's locally or on holiday, you spot one that you think is of concern, please, please, please bring it to the attention of the War Graves Commission, and it will be sorted out. Absolutely no question about it. It will be sorted out. And just on a personal note, can I thank you all for all the work that you do with the local British Legion? Because I buy the wooden crosses from you every year and go around as many of the 88 that I can in the M24 area, and I put a little cross on, and I know that that has been assisted by the Legion, not just out of my own pocket. So thank you for the assistance given with the funding for that, as informal as it was. That's personal thank you from me, so thank you for that. Oh, and that's another thing. If you are going to any of the graves and you've got a poppy wreath or a poppy cross, and you're wanting to put it on the commission, can you please not attach it to the headstone? Portland stone in particular is incredibly sensitive. It wears out really quickly, and the other thing that happens is the dye, the red dye from the poppies, stains the stone. I found a couple up at St John Thornham where somebody had super glued a couple of poppies onto the top of the headstone, and the headstone's got a bit stained now. If they're found, we will respectfully remove them and put them by the foot of the grave. If you are doing it, please put it at the foot of the grave and try not to have it leaning on it, only because of the staining. Or if you attach it over, it obscures the name, and the name has to be legible for everyone. So if you are going up and commemorating anybody with wreaths or poppies or big bunches of flowers, try to not attach them to the stone, if I could make a plea for that, because it breaks my heart when we have to take them off the stone. You think, oh God, because you can't leave notes every time.
May I just ask, the young gentleman here is part of a group of scouts who are really interested in helping out.
I think we messaged like a couple months
Is your
back.
surname Ellsworth?
Yeah.
Yes, I'll talk to you. Yeah, because our main coordinator got another job and has just been replaced with another coordinator. That's what Alan's doing. So, yes, I haven't forgotten you. Is it Mark? You're Mark, right, your dad.
Uncle.
The Ellsworths, yes. I do remember you. I do remember the conversation. I did try to get it, but change of coordinator threw everything into a spin. So, yes, thank you. We will sort that one out.
Thank you.
Anything
That,
else?
I think we all learned something there.
We have so
We didn't know.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it
you
was
never,
really
you never know, we might have you
informative.
back for round two.
Please do. We do have separate presentations on gardening the globe. I know nothing about gardening, so if you thought I was referring to notes on that one, oh my word, gardening the globe. I've been assigned to do bit away, Women's Institute soon for
Okay.
gardening. Oh my God, you know, the Jam in Jerusalem crowd are going to know way more than me about gardening. I'll be taken to Denham and sort of strung and quartered, and we do an art and architecture one, and we do one about the archives as well, and they're much shorter with much less gibbering from me, because I'm not as good at gibbering about them. And my granddad didn't go and paint anything or do any gardening for them. God love him. Never met the man, funnily enough. Yeah, so we do have them. Or if you want round 2 of the same thing, because the rate it's going, this presentation changes every 2 or 3 months. So they say, right, can you check your presentation? And you're doing that, trying to learn it all again. Print it out without the cat sitting on everything, but that's another matter. And that's it, but yes, I am more than happy to do revisits and re-jibbers.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, it's been really informative. Thank
I can even jibber on about doing the comments.